Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for having me here today. It's a pleasure. And in the next 20 minutes, I will aim to take you through some highlights of this scan I've developed with Orange Trail, and also share with you some recommendations based on the findings. So this is the agenda I'm suggesting for today. I don't really think you have much of a choice given that I'm sharing the slides with you, but I hope you find them interesting and that you stick with the presentation. And I'm also aiming to have some minutes at the end for you to ask any questions that you want. A panda gets into a bar and eats, shoots, and leaves. And the bartender runs after the panda and asks, "Why did you do just that?" And the panda said, "I looked it up in the dictionary, and that's what it said pandas do: eats, shoots, and leaves." And it's amazing the power of just one little comma, isn't it? Because actually the dictionary should just say panda eats, shoots and leaves. So this funny story taken from this book by Lynn Truss is really to point out, and you'll see that throughout the presentation, the importance of looking at enterprise social tools as a whole. Never losing sight of the end goal and the purpose of having these platforms, rather than looking at different elements, maybe functionalities or functions or little pilots. So the social collaboration maturity model was developed by Orange Trail. It's a Dutch consulting company focused on social tools, obviously. And from their experience, they gathered that organizations go through different stages in terms of the way they use these platforms. And stage one is where you're using the platform to reach out to people. Stage two, you're actually using the platforms to becoming smarter, maybe finding out what's happening. And stage three, which is obviously where you want to get to, is where the organization is using the platform to be faster and more agile. And the higher you go, or the further you go, you'll get more employee engagement, but also you'll get more business value. And when looking at these maturity stages, we're focusing on 7 different areas: leaders, internal communications, teams, communities, innovation support functions, and employees. And what we've done was to consider this model and get in touch with different organizations and see how they are using their platforms in order to assess the different stages of maturity. And in this first year that we've done this scan, we got responses from 34 organizations from 13 different countries in pretty much all continents. And these companies actually represent more than 1.5 million employees. So although the number of organizations is not huge, it's still a very interesting representation of organizations, also because they are from very different sectors. So let me go into these highlights. This image here aims to capture the main findings from the scan. And I'm not hoping you can read them. Actually, the report is free for you to download. We don't even ask for your details, so you just need to go on the website and access it. And when you look at these, I don't think it's it's very difficult to see what is the lowest performing of the areas. And it's interesting that with all this conversation on all these things that are being said about digital transformation, and leaders and organizations putting so much emphasis on digital transformation, leaders that themselves are the ones that are using the platforms in the most or in the least mature way, rather. So actually, what we see is that 89% of leaders do not even use the platforms to collaborate and to communicate with their teams. So they make very little use of the platform, and therefore they are missing out on a huge opportunity to understand what their teams are doing and to engage with their teams and get a sense of how they're doing. And also they're missing out an opportunity to show their vision, what they have in mind, and communicate in a more engaging and involving way. In terms of the goals, what we also found out, interestingly enough, is that the main reason for organizations to invest in social collaboration platforms is actually to increase knowledge sharing. And considering that knowledge management is my main passion, I was delighted to see these results. But there's also two other significant points, which is organizations are also looking at these platforms as a way of connecting people and also to increase and improve the collaboration across departments, across departments and geographies. One really important thing that I need to mention is that all this data was gathered before the pandemic, the COVID pandemic. So, and we'll look into that later, because I suspect that some of these things, some of these goals were probably different, or the priorities were probably different if we were to ask the same organization what's the main purpose for their platforms at the moment. But let me get back to this point of the top goal being increasing knowledge sharing, because one of the things that is really, really visible when looking at the data is that the silo mentality is still very, very visible. So on 84% of the organizations, or the vast majority of organizations, have very few communities with a structured approach to communicate with the wider organization. So communities are using the platforms to work together, to learn together, to develop their knowledge, but they're not actually using the platform to reach out and share that learning with others. And something very similar happens with teams, because they are still working within themselves and not actually reaching outside of their confines. The other interesting thing is around internal communications. Internal communications teams are not exploring different formats, and some of them are creating dialogues to drive change, but we suspect that these dialogues are actually not as strategic and planned as they could, and they're missing out on the opportunity there. And some of these things around internal comms are related also to the way they are measuring success. So success is very much measured around the number of views on a post or the number of people who like the post. And that is hardly a measure of the effectiveness of communications, and it should actually be replaced by the impact of these communication in terms of the business. Obviously, that's a lot harder to do, but it's obviously, I'm sure you agree, a much more meaningful measure of success for internal communications. Interestingly, is when we look at the data about how organizations consider or see the value of these their platforms, is that a vast majority or a majority say that the platforms are very or extremely valuable. Some of them even consider that they would not be able to work without their platforms. But given what the data I've showed before and the low maturity of many of the aspects, I think it's fair to say that these platforms are actually being underutilized, and they could organizations could do a much better use of these platforms and therefore get much better results. But as I mentioned before, these data was gathered before COVID. So what I'd like to share with you is how we think this has changed now that COVID is upon us and made so much, at such a dent in the way we are working at the moment. So when we asked when we asked these organizations the questions, we asked them not just the goals they had initially for their platforms, but also what were their objectives for the next 12 months. And increasing the business value derived from the platform was at the top, which is actually very interesting considering that the organizations who answered that were mostly the organizations who already consider that they are getting high value from their platform. So it's clear the sense that the more organizations use these platforms, the more they want out of them because they realize the potential the platforms have. But with all these things around COVID, something that for some organizations was a luxury or something that could wait was now a priority because people had to go work from home, and people are now working from home. And what we've seen in the last months was this shift from a surviving mode. So all of a sudden, everyone needs to go home, and the tools had to respond because people had to continue their work. Some organizations, and for instance, I was actually working with an organization and we had started an adoption process or program rather for their platform 2 weeks, 15 days before everyone had to go home. So that was a program that had been planned from the beginning of the year, and we were executing the plan, we were executing the strategy, and 15 days into the program, everyone was like suddenly rushed home to work from home. And although we had a strategy and we had a plan, it was surviving. It was just survival mode kicking in and making sure that people were not just invited to use the tools, but they were actually equipped to use the tools effectively to continue their day-to-day work. So after this surviving period, we went into a more kind of routine. So people were already working online in a better or worse way, more mature or less mature forms. They were working online. So what we're actually seeing now is that organizations have people working from home, but they notice that staff is losing touch with a corporate message. So engagement is getting a bit low, and it's necessary to get people again on board and engaged with the vision and the business objectives. And I think the next stage is about embracing this new way of working. It's just not just using the technology and the functionality to continue work as it was before, but really embracing the opportunities and the potential of these tools to find better ways of working and achieve the business results. So finally, some recommendations, if I may. And these recommendations are obviously drawn from the data we collected in the scan, but also from the experience both myself and Orange Trail have. And the first one, which is probably seems very basic and silly, is about increasing awareness about social technology and the value it can bring to organizations. When I mentioned the surviving mode, what we've seen was people using the technology, but very often on a now I'm working from home, I need to contact my colleagues, so I'll chat or I'll do a video conference. That is hardly using the technology and the platforms in the best possible way. This is about replicating old ways of working, using the technology without using the technology to work better and smarter. And the reason why this is happening is mostly because organizations and employees and leaders do not know the potential of these tools for engagement, for agility, for leadership. And it's important that this work happens so that we have something to aim for and that we become creative about using these platforms. This leads to another thing, another aspect, which is digital literacy. And this is not just about knowing how to use the tools. This is about creating the culture and developing a way of working that embraces digital. And this means embracing transparency, being open, being okay with things being open in a more transparent way, if you want. And this is threatening for many people, but it also is an amazing opportunity. And it's okay that people feel threatened, but it's important that they also see the potential. And this is about this digital literacy. It's really, really important. The other thing is leaders will be afraid. And we see already organizations pushing people back to the office. Now that the crisis mode is gone, there's a big, big push of organizations wanting staff back in the office. And this is very often due to leaders being afraid. They want to control people and they feel that having people in the office is a better way of controlling them. So it's important that be it internal comms or HR or someone is able to give the hand to the leaders and take them through the possibilities and the opportunities and help them use these platforms and help them see the benefits. And obviously the benefits are linked to business results. So it is also important that whatever you do, you link these activities, this way of working with the results, and you find ways of measuring the impact of these platforms by seeing or understanding how them being used is helping the organization achieve their business goals. And well, we're in a moment where we also need to ask more from the vendors in general, obviously. Platform vendors need to lead the way. They should not just be responding to specific requests from their users. They have an obligation to do that, but they also have an obligation to push clients to work better and more effectively and more efficiently. And at the end of the day, if you as a vendor can help and inspire clients to work in better ways, you have everything to gain. And one last recommendation, probably obvious after everything I said. I think this pandemic situation has challenged us in very, very different ways. But it's also a huge opportunity that now that we've given people a taste of working from home, and also organizations and leaders a chance to see that it is possible to work that way, I think we just need to embrace this opportunity to push organizations a little bit more and make that more of a way of working, not just replicating old ways of working within the platforms, using the technology, but even better, to push them to reinvent the way they work, to find opportunities by embracing the functionality that is available in the platforms, and find a better way of working that uses the knowledge, the experience, the enthusiasm of employees without some of the restrictions that we were used to see. So I guess that going back to the Panda, I think it's important that we aim to embrace activities that look at the 3 stages of maturity. Don't go for the shallow, the low-hanging fruit, because actually the juicier fruit is at the top. So go for it all. Don't slice the platforms in chunks, and you'll get a much better result by doing so. So thank you. I think I still have a few minutes left. If you have any questions, I'd be delighted to answer them.
Yeah, so if you have any questions, you can use the raise hand functionality and I will unmute you. If you can find it. We just tested it and it seems to work.
So
there's a question from Jörg. I don't know if you see it or not. Okay.
No one's, can you?
Which way to measure success of an ESN do you suggest?
So I think the measurement of success needs to really be linked to the business objectives. So let's say that one of the business objectives is about being able to reach new markets. It needs to be, we need to find ways of looking at the platform as a way of, for instance, identifying pockets of knowledge that exist within the organization that help us do just that. Maybe it's people who are from that new market we want to tap into, or people who have worked there, or people who are passionate about the culture of that country. And we can use the platform to identifying those people. And if we can then link back to say, okay, so we had this objective, and by leveraging the network that we have within our organization, by using the platform to do just that, we were able to act a lot faster, or to identify some key points within that new market that allowed us to move faster and get there faster. So these are very specific things, and it's a lot of work sometimes, because most of these measures are not quantitative as likes and comments, but they are extremely important, because at the end of the day, if next year the business top management asks, so why should we continue investing in this platform, they will not care about the number of likes you got. They will want to understand what was the business benefit that the platform was able to deliver. So you need these narratives to offer them that. And the other thing is, even for leaders, they will have their own business objectives. So if they can leverage the platform to engage their teams and involve their teams in addressing specific problems they have, they will know that. They will see the business value of doing that and engaging the network in that way.
Thanks. There is another question from Peter, who says, I might have missed it, but what are the plans regarding researching the effect of COVID-19 on these results?
It's a very good question. When we did this first edition of the scan, we obviously thought that if it went well, we would do it next year, and we still have plans to do it next year. And if we do, we will want to have something in there in terms of the questions that tap into the impact of COVID. I think the maturity stages will still be the same, but it will be some of the characterizing questions which will be tweaked to reflect the the impact of COVID in how organizations are looking at the tool. And hopefully we'll be able to get responses from these same organizations. And for the 34 that took part this year, maybe we can do a before and after thing. But yes, let's see. But please do get the link on this link that I am currently sharing. You can find the report, and you can also register to be part of the scan next year, which will make you part of this overall benchmark, but also gives you a free report with some your results and some recommendations as well.
Okay, thank you very much, Anna.
Thank you.